And welcome in to another episode of Heat of the Moment. My name is Micah. I am joined, as always, by my fellow host and friend Lino. And today we have a draft crash course for all of you Heat fans. Lino and I are by no means draft experts, but we have been kind of playing catch up on the different prospects that could be available to the Heat with the 20th overall pick. And we're going to give you guys a 10,000 foot view of these different prospects and how they might be able to fill roles for the Heat, what archetypes these players fall within. So it'll be fun to get into. Before we jump into that, of course, we have at least a little offseason news percolating, as there always seems to be in the NBA, even though the finals are still currently going on. So as of today, June 11th, the update is we got an official report from Shams Charania saying that Kevin Durant and his business partner slash agent Rich Kleiman is working with the Phoenix Suns to make a trade happen. And there were, I believe, 5 teams listed. It was San Antonio, Houston, Minnesota, New York, and Miami. And those are the teams we've heard pretty much throughout this whole process. None of that was very surprising. I did note in Sham's report, he mentioned that this 2-year extension Durant will be looking for, potentially at around $60 million per year. That will weigh heavily into the teams he kind of gives the green light to trade for him. So I think, not to pat ourselves on the back, but if you've been listening to the show, these are all things we've kind of been expecting. We know where the sticking points may be, whether Ware is included or not, and whether the Heat will be willing to give him this 2-year extension that would actually run a year longer than the extension they weren't willing to give Jimmy Butler and would run into his age 39 season. So will the Heat be able to outbid these teams? Will they be willing to include all the draft picks, all the young players on the roster? All of that remains to be seen, but all the reporting seems like this will happen prior to the draft, which is about a couple weeks from today. So, Lino, did the report today kind of interest you in any way? Did it spark any new thoughts, or kind of more of the same for you?
I think we're still really in the same spot we were, just with maybe some affirmation that there's a chance and that at least both parties have some level of interest. It's just a matter of the third party, the Phoenix Suns, are willing to play ball or not. It's like, I don't know if you've ever seen that image or that meme of like, I consent, I consent. Oh, but you forgot to ask the third person. Did Jesus consent? That's pretty much the situation we're in right now. If the Phoenix Suns are not going to drag us over the coals for this, then I think we could make something happen, which is exciting for some, not so exciting for some of our fan base. There does seem to be, as this gets closer, I think the fan base is starting to pick sides as far as who really wants to see a 37-year-old Kevin Durant in a Miami Heat jersey next season. And while I am one of those people, I can definitely understand the hesitation of getting older rather than younger. So we'll see what happens. I did like that extension does really kind of align well with the rest of Bam and Tyler's extensions and contracts at that point. By the time we get to the end of the KD experience, it should at least also be the end of the Bam and Tyler experience one way or the other, or we've seen tremendous amount of success and we find them a new running mate in that third spot. So we'll see what happens, but I think we're not too much further in one direction or the other from where we were before these reports came out.
Yeah, well said. It's nice to be included. I'm glad the Heat were on the list. It'd be pretty disappointing if they weren't. And Shams did mention there were a couple dark horse suitors, I believe is how he's referred to them. So that could be maybe Toronto. Some people have floated maybe like Detroit. So we'll see if any other teams flare up, and ultimately what teams are willing to give up for Durant. While you were talking, it did remind me, like, man, I'm very tired as a Heat fan of dealing with Phoenix Suns front office shenanigans. Like, I kind of hadn't thought about it, but even though they didn't make a trade, the Heat had to deal with Phoenix's front office for so long last year,
Oh
and
yeah.
I really think we're frustrated by it. Like, all the reporting of Jimmy and his camp basically trying to strong arm Miami into a deal with Phoenix, basically force them to take Bradley Beal back. So I wonder how these two front offices are getting along, especially because James Jones, former Heat player and a person that's close to a lot of people still in the organization, he's still a part of the Suns organization, but has definitely been kind of put to the side and is no longer the lead decision maker there. Although I think once Matt Ishbia bought the team, he basically became the lead decision maker.
Mhm.
But we'll see if relationships kind of come into play here. I did see a report today I believe from Brian Windhorst, saying the Suns are looking to get back a similar package to what they traded to acquire Durant. And I'm like, if we're 2 weeks out and you guys think you're getting that, like you're getting 2.5 years of Kevin Durant for free, then I mean, I know you have to just, I guess, say that to the media, but I really hope that's not what they think is realistic, because I don't think they're going to get anything close to that. But
Yeah.
we'll see. And we have a lot of episodes if you guys have missed any, kind of talking over different potential Durant trade packages. So if you're wondering why we're not getting too in depth on that, it's something we've covered a ton. So definitely check those out. They still apply. It's a nice thing about the offseason. It's all the same numbers and salary structures. So definitely check those out. But now to get into the bulk of today's episode, it's going to be a draft episode. Now, of course, if this Kevin Durant trade happens, then we might not have a pick. But as of right now, the Heat have the 20th pick in the draft via the Golden State Warriors. Who could they select with this pick? Will they select anyone with this pick? Will it be moved? A lot of questions. But so we're going to break down potentially some guys that could be available in this range. We never know exactly how the draft is going to go, but based off of different mock drafts and intel people are getting, this is our best bet. Before we get into the prospects themselves, I think it's important to know a couple of things. One, the 20th pick will, I think, probably be involved in almost any trade the Heat make prior to the draft. So if it's something on the smaller side, like a DeRozan trade, it might be in that. If it's something larger, like a KD trade, it could be in that. It's also worth noting, so far, the Heat have worked out very few players. There's a lot of draft workouts going on right now. As reported, VJ Edgecombe had a big workout with Philly today, and now he's being eyed as like the number 3 pick. But the Heat have basically only worked out guys so far that are projected to either be second round picks or to go undrafted. And I do think that's noteworthy. It doesn't mean there aren't other workouts happening that just haven't gotten out, or the Heat are maybe just slower to do this than a lot of teams, or it could simply be a scheduling issue. But it is worth noting that the Heat have not been working out guys we'd expect to see in the 20th range, and that could potentially be communicating that they are planning on moving this pick. But I expect them to still do some workouts. You have to do your due diligence. There's no guarantee a trade is already set. So that's something to keep in mind. And then finally, before we get into these picks, Lino, I know you always enjoy when I do these, but I just want to read the last 10 20th overall picks, because
Oh yeah.
Lino and I are about to talk about a bunch of players, and as we're going through them, you're probably going to hear a lot of flaws, and you're like, man, that's not exciting. I want somebody to be excited about. Well, it's the 20th overall pick. A lot of times, there's going to be flaws you have to look past, or upside you really have to depend on, because these prospects have issues. So I believe this is in chronological order. Last year, it was Jalen Tyson, a player I actually like, but didn't really play that much for Cleveland, so TBD on that. Year before that, Cam Whitmore, definitely somebody I'd be excited to have on the Heat. Before that, Malachi Branham, solid role player. Year before that, Jalen Johnson, maybe best case
Very
scenario.
good. Surely there's more of him around, right?
Right. Year before that, Precious Achua. Heat fans are very
Sick.
familiar. Year before that, Matisse Tybel. Then we go to Josh Okogie. Then we go to Harry Giles. So that's like 4 players in a row. They're really like fringe rotation, really fringe NBA players. And then we finish out with Karis LeVert, very solid bench player. And then DeLon Wright, who is, a rotation-ish player, contributed for the Knicks this year a little bit. So that'll set the stage. There's no perfect prospects at 20, because they would be selected higher if they were. But we're going to talk about a few guys. Some are higher on, some are lower on. Lino, I think it makes the most sense to start with guards, a position you could argue the Heat are needy in or not, depending on how you value different guys that are currently on the roster. But the guy I want to start with is maybe the most famous guy we're going to talk about, because he was on the national championship team, and that is Walter Clayton Jr. So his measurements, he's 6'2", with a 6'4" wingspan, so pretty small. He's about 200 pounds, so he's a little stockier. Big red flag next to this number, he's 22.3 years old. He was a senior, and he's got a lot of skills we can get into, but I'd want to throw it to you first. What are your kind of general Walter Clayton feelings?
Yeah, I mean, overall, he's probably the prospect I have the most eagerness or excitement about as far as potential upside. I think There's a lot of different aspects of his skill set that could fit well on this roster, but also his particular timeline and where he's at in his development actually would work out pretty well for a team that I guess maybe has KD. I mean, if we have KD, we probably don't have this pick, but maybe there's a scenario where they don't value the 20th pick in this draft very much and we send them a future pick instead. But I do feel like he'd be kind of a Tyler 2.0 to have off of the bench that could possibly play next to Drew Smith. If we still have Davion Mitchell and Tyler starting, then we'd have someone who can still score relatively well. He shot really well in this past season, I believe 45% shooting overall, 39% from three on 8 attempts per game, and like 88% from the field. So almost 50, 40, 90 splits, which is, relatively impressive on pretty good volume. He's obviously not a great defender due to his size, but he's also not so much a traffic cone and feels a little bit more pesky on defense and has a lot more energy on that side than Tyler does. So there's kind of some upside on that end. But I don't necessarily see him as a starter next to Tyler. But if for some reason we were to trade Tyler away, we'd have some facsimile of that style of guard who could play that combo guard situation. And I think his like assist to turnover ratio was like 1.4, 1.5 or something like that. So not a prolific passer, but Tyler isn't exactly a prolific passer either. And I have seen some highlights of him scoring relatively well off the DHO. So there are signs that there are a lot of ways it could work for this guy, and he does seem to have that kind of readiness to be a contributor within the next 3 years, which would be really important for whatever this team decides to do moving forward. So I could understand them going after an older guy like that. It's in kind of our history to do so with picks like Jaime Jaquez Jr. and things of that nature. Definitely not a perfect player and one that I could definitely see why he might fall to the 20th pick, but there are elements of his game that are relatively exciting to me as far as best case scenarios. But I mean, living in Florida, being around Florida Gators fans, I know you've probably seen and heard a lot about this player, either for better or for worse. So, what are your thoughts on him, and kind of how would you see him as a fit with the Miami Heat?
Yeah, so it's a running joke with my family and friends that the player within reason that I want the Heat to draft least is usually who they end up drafting. So I have accepted the Heat are going to draft Walter Clayton Jr. because
Excellent.
going back for several months now, I've adamantly been low on him as a prospect. And not like crazy. Like, I don't think you should go undrafted or anything, but I think the tournament really raised his level in terms of how he's perceived as a prospect, because going into that he was thought of maybe closer to like a second round pick. Now you see some mocks with him going within the top 20, let alone at 20 where the Heat are. So I mean, I don't have a full big board. I'd say he's probably around like the 30th best prospect in this class, something like that. But Walter Clayton Jr. can shoot that rock, man. He can
Dude.
score the basketball, and that's important. But he was 22. He was playing college defenders, college players. He's in the SEC. He's probably the best conference last year, and obviously won the national championship. So a big game player. But I do worry with a small guard, you just have to be so elite as a scorer to just be a rotation NBA player, right? Like you think of, I mean, you could say somebody like Lou Williams, even like a Nate Robinson type guy. Like you really have to have some outlier traits just to be serviceable. And I hate that's a starting point for a prospect, especially a prospect that's older that we kind of usually would project to not get a lot better than they are now. So he's fiery. I like his competitiveness. I think maybe he could guard point guards okay. Obviously
Mhm.
he'll be hunted in switches, but he can definitely score well. He's not somebody I would be jumping out of my seat on draft night, but the Heat have had a pretty good record as far as drafting recently. So if they take him, I'd understand and try. I'm sure I could talk myself into it within a couple
Mhm.
days. The other nice
And I,
thing about Walter Clayton Jr. is he was like designed in a lab to dominate summer league. Like
yeah.
he's like built to average at least 20 a game in summer league. So that'll help fans that maybe are more concerned about his upside.
Absolutely. And I think part of it is the fact that, we do trust this front office when it comes to drafting so much. And so if they were to kind of see the things that they needed to see to feel like he could have long term success, then I'd be bought in pretty fast. One of those things that I think really stood out to me statistically that may not feel very real or may not really translate is I think he's like finishing like 60% at the rim right now, which is a solid number. But as I was looking at it, it didn't really feel like he was that good of a rim finisher. And so I'm not sure if a lot of that was just from transition, but the way he got to his shots, it doesn't seem like he creates a ton of space or takes these really amazing angles, but rather just has kind of a tough finish over guys, which I think is a skill set, being a tough shot maker. But at the same time, when you're doing it against business majors from the SEC, it just might not have that same translation to the NBA and the size and physicality that game happens in. But if he can turn out to be a somewhat effective 3 level scorer, then that is going to be, a great piece to have. Having a second 3 point shooter, or even a third if Davion Mitchell's 3 point shooting holds up, and we have those three as our guards, that could be something special. But the size is a concern. What's going to translate is a concern, and the fact that the ceiling couldn't technically be much higher than where he is right now definitely leave me kind of on the fence. But yeah, all it would take is like one 25-point game in summer league, and I'd be fully bought in for sure.
Yeah, that's a great read by you too. As you were talking, it reminded me about his finishing. He did shoot, I think, depending on how it's categorized, some places have it as almost 65% at the rim. So for
Oh
a
wow.
small guard, sounds amazing. But yeah, you look, I believe it was Sam Vecini for the New York Times posted his big draft guide. And he was able, I guess, using synergy to look at Walter Clayton Jr.'s half court rim finishing, and that drops all the way down to under 55%. So that
Oh,
that is
there it is.
highlighting a lot of
We
that is coming
found you.
in. Yeah, exactly. So you do have to watch out for that, especially in college when, it's a lot easier to turn teams over. You're getting a lot more opportunities in transition. You have to watch out for that kind of thing with these guys. So something to keep in mind there. But yeah, so Walter Clayton Jr., first guard that you should keep an eye on. I do know the Heat. I think he's a clutch guy. The Heat went to like the clutch draft player showcase. I know they've been to a couple Florida games this year, so they've definitely seen a lot of this guy, and I wouldn't be surprised if they bring him in for a private workout. For the next guard, we're going to go overseas and check out Nolan Traore. Traore is an interesting prospect because this time a year ago, he was probably projected to be a top 5 pick. People were very excited about him. And then, by all accounts, he has really struggled overseas playing. And that has dropped his draft stock quite a bit. Right now, I believe The Ringer and Yahoo both have the Heat projected to take him at 20. So that gives you an idea of where people are expecting him to go. He's a 6'4 guard with a 6'8 wingspan. So that's nice measurables, about 185 pounds. He's 19 years old, so he's fairly young. His passing and his driving abilities are probably his two biggest green flags as a prospect. And as you would guess, a guy in the 20s, there are some red flags. But Lino, with Traore, when you were watching his tape or just reading about him, were there things that stood out to you, either as positives or negatives?
Yeah, I mean, I think the size is what made it really attractive. It would be really nice to have a guard with size there. That's definitely something that Walter Clayton Jr. lacks, but it is tough to watch a play. It's funny, honestly, in a sad kind of way. Uh, you know, as a young 18-year-old player averaging like 12 points, 5 assists, 3 rebounds. Everybody's like, oh man, this guy is really good. Like there's something here. And then you turn 19 and you average 15 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. And everybody's like, oh, actually, this guy is not on the trajectory we thought he was on. Improvement at that level and rapid improvement is such an important thing when it comes to draft prospecting, it seems. And not that I'm a professional in analyzing those kind of things, but that does seem to turn the tide on a player's prospect pretty fast. And he didn't necessarily have a season much worse than his first season, but the fact that he didn't have a much better season makes it really hard to anticipate him having a linear level of growth going into the league, especially since the competition didn't get much harder as he was continuing to play overseas. I think that there wasn't much that jumped out to me. I think certain statistics they have him averaging as high as like 6 assists per game, which some people would be excited about that kind of playmaking or passing rather. And for me, it just when I was watching what the assists look like, they didn't really seem like high level IQ passes. They just seem like typical, like, hey, I'm running a pick and roll. That guy's open. He does have a very smooth style of play. Like it's very patient offense, which is great. He never seems too rushed, but it didn't seem like he was really picking apart defenses either. And so with that, and not being super impressed by the scoring, ultimately, I just found myself being underwhelmed uh, as with him as a prospect. Though I've seen a lot of Miami Heat people online be relatively excited about the potential of drafting him. I'm just not seeing it. But have you seen anything else that kind of really could paint him as a perfect fit for the Miami Heat, or anything in particular about his game that you find interesting?
Yeah, I think the positive spin, like the best outcome is he's got good size. So
Hmm.
if everything tracks well, it seems like he could be a pretty good ball handler, a facilitator, kind of a floor general type guy that leaves a lot of the scoring to Tyler and is also maybe able to guard the other team's ball handlers with that 6'8" wingspan. And I thought his on ball defense, from what I've read and what I've watched, had some good flashes. It was really the off ball stuff where it seemed like there maybe was a lack of focus or even understanding of like help concepts and what exactly he was supposed to be doing. But this is a player, again, at 19 years old, who a year ago had a lot of hype, had some huge games. I think it was I'm going to get this wrong. I think the FIBA U18, he had like a 40-point game. Everybody's freaking out. He said he's had some huge games, but then also obviously he's had a really big down year. So there's potential there. And this is the kind of guy at 20. Like if the Heat made this pick, I'm totally cool with it. Like it might not work out, but this guy has potential. And honestly, reminds me a little bit of Jovic's pre-draft trajectory, right? Because I remember partially because his name was close to Jokic, but there was a lot of hype about him a year before his draft. People had him projected top 5, and then almost similar to Traore, just didn't totally put it together, didn't have the linear progression that people were expecting, and so then he fell to, I believe, is 17, 19, no, it was 27, I think, where the Heat ultimately selected him. And Jovic has been a good role player, and that's what you're looking for in the back half of the first round. So, yeah, Traore, he's not my favorite guard in this range, but definitely would be okay if the Heat took him because I think, he's got big question marks, but he's got some potential too.
Yeah, I agree. I think I wouldn't be upset at taking the pick there either. The size is just always something that I'm happy to bet on, especially at that guard position.
Yeah. Yeah. And he is one of those guys where he is not really an efficient jump shooter right now. And in the NBA, that's so tough because if you have the ball and you can't shoot, teams are just going to go under. You're not really going to be able to create advantages. And then if you're not good enough to create advantages, most teams then would try and put you off ball. But if you're off ball and you can't shoot, then you're just hurting everyone else on the court. So he definitely would be a developmental pick, but that's something we've seen the Heat have great success with ultimately. So yeah, I would be totally fine if they selected him on draft night. And would definitely prefer him even to somebody like Walter Clayton Jr., who's a lot more established, but also again is a lot more older and probably a finished product in that sense. But to get to the last guard we're going to be talking about today, the draft is so much fun because I was going through all these prospects, and this isn't in the order we looked at them, but I had looked at 4 or 5 prospects, and I was like, oh, he's cool. Oh, I'd be okay with that. And then you just get to your guy, and it's
Hmm.
almost immediate. It's just like, oh, I love this kind of player. And for me, in this cycle, in this Heat range, it's Jace Richardson. This is Michigan State guard. He's 6'1". He's a little dude, but he has a 6'6" wingspan, which is pretty good. He's 180 pounds. He's pretty stocky, pretty strong. And if Jace Richardson sounds familiar, that is because he is the son of NBA All-Star, I believe, Jason Richardson. So he has a
Thought you were
real,
about
like,
to say Josh Richardson. I said that's insane,
that
but
would be crazy.
okay.
No, the other Jay Rich. So yeah, he's got good pedigree, good lineage. He's 19.7 years old, so still a pretty young prospect. He was a one and done. He's a lefty, and Ooh, buddy, can he shoot that rock?
Bro's got a
Oh,
clip. Oh my
it's
gosh.
beautiful. It's gorgeous. He is pretty smooth though. It's not like he's just a shooter. He can really score the rock. I thought he had some really good flashes with his ball handling. He is extremely left hand dominant, which is to be expected with left handed players. He's not doing a lot of finishes with his right hand. He can't really pass with his right hand, but that left hand can work and it works well for him. And, offhand stuff can be developed, but I was just really impressed with everything I watched for him. Reading about him, it sounded like for the most of the first half of the year for Michigan State, he actually came off the bench, which isn't crazy to see a freshman do that, especially these guys are staying longer and longer in college now. But then he got more and more reps. Tom Izzo trusted him more and more to run offense, and he really excelled. I mean, he was at, I believe, like over 60% true shooting, handled a lot of playmaking. It was only at like 20% usage, but again, that's with it being lower and kind of ascending up into the season. And he really took on that added responsibility and seemed to excel. So obviously, the offense is very exciting. He's tiny, right? He's 6'1". He measured, in the combine they do without shoes. So he was like 6 foot and a half inch without shoes. So he's probably like 6'2", really 6'1", NBA standards with shoes on. So he's little, but he's got, again, 6'6" wingspan. He's stocky. He competes. And honestly, he just has so many other skills that I trust someone like him to be more of an outlier than someone like Walter Clayton Jr. Because, again, Jace is a lot younger. Jace was closer to like 70% at the rim. He's a very good finisher. And in my opinion, we don't have to compare all these guys to each other, but he kind of does everything Walter Clayton does, except he's better at it, seems to be a better decision maker, have better feel, and he's 3 years younger. So that's my Jace Richardson pitch. Lino, did you get to watch any of him? What were your thoughts on the Michigan State guard?
Yeah, to be honest, this whole time we've been recording, I've just had his highlights going probably for the past 20 minutes. I just have him on in the background. This kid is an absolute bucket. Like I can't even pretend to get statistically into this as far as what he did in college, but just from what I've watched today, it's just one of those draft prospects where like, oh, I just randomly found out about this guy today, and now the next month of my life is just going to be obsessed getting to know this guy. It's pure hoops. Like if you're out there and you don't want to be, if you don't like advanced stats and you don't like looking at the box score and looking at draft prospects from size and all these different angles, like if you just want to go find a guy who can get buckets, this is that guy for you. He's a very fun prospect in that regard. He can score in so many different ways. His whole bag just seems very fluid and smooth, and there's probably a ton of crazy comparisons you can make that you really shouldn't, and I'm sure I will given a week's time. But that on that side is pretty exciting. Now, like I said, I don't know the prospect very well as far as like what he has to offer on defense at 6'1", 180 pounds. I don't know if it's very much, but as far as finding somebody who can go out there and get a bucket, which the Heat are always in desperate need of. Offensive firepower. The more offensive weapons we can get, the better. Our defense is typically always in the top 10. Our offense has really struggled to reach that same level over the past few years. So I would be happy about that pick. Probably one of the more exciting picks for us. And I think that youthfulness and the fact that he would have 3 years of development before he even hit the same level as some of these other prospects we've talked about, that is pretty attractive. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it just good feel, like just knows where to be on the court. You can tell, he's a pros kid. Like
Yeah.
I think it
He's
was
got
the
that
no
penetrative
ceilings.
dribble. He's got the snake dribble. Like he knows how to really probe for the shot that he wants. And he's also decisive at the same time.
Yeah, and fluidity off ball. He knows, like, hey, I'm a big threat without the basketball. He fills corners, he moves around, and really to be, highly recruited freshman, I thought showed a lot of unselfishness, and it seemed like what I read, people were echoing that same sentiment. It's not like he was ball dominant. Like I said, he came off the bench, didn't have super high usage, but that didn't mean he just stood in the corner when the play was a run for him. He was cutting, he was moving, leveraging his shooting to help his teammates. The No Ceilings podcast, I believe, highlighted that specifically. So I wanted to shout that out as well. So yeah, very excited for Jace. And there's guys at this size that could have success, especially if his shooting translates well. I think Mike Conley is kind of a fun comp for him. Conley is definitely a better passer, and honestly, as a prospect, Conley isn't a good match because Conley wasn't a great shooter and then developed into one. But the pro Mike Conley has become could be something Jace could try and attain. If he gets even stockier and stronger, maybe Fred Van Fleet could be somebody he could try and emulate. And then Reed Shepard, who is somebody I really liked in last year's draft, is kind of a similar profile to Jace, where he's a high level shooter, good active hands on defense, but kind of undersized, as a guy that normally profile kind of as a two guard in terms of skill set. So big fan of Jace Richardson, which probably means like Philly is going to somehow take him. But if the Heat were able to take him, he's definitely my number one on like my Heat board in terms of like relatively realistic guys that could be there. Next up, we have the guy that might feel like the most quintessential Heat pick in this entire draft, and that is Colorado State's Nick Clifford. He is a 6'5 wing, 6'8 wingspan, 200 pounds. This man is 23 years old. He is a graduate senior, 5 years
What are you
of
doing here,
college.
Unc?
5 years of college experience, and he's kind of a do-it-all, jack of all trades type player. He kind of struggled early in his career, then got a lot better. It's obviously concerning that you're 5 years in and it still doesn't seem like you have an elite skill, but seems to have some role player capabilities. The more I read about him, the more I was like, this guy sounds a lot like Caleb Martin, which would
That's
be
kind of
cool.
exciting.
Like, I wouldn't be mad at another Caleb Martin. And again, like the Heat, like we always talk about, they're always going to try and compete. So it's nice to draft upside, but they've shown they're not afraid to throw a more experienced rookie into the fire, and a lot of times have success with that. So did you have any thoughts on Nick Clifford? Is this somebody you'd be interested in
Never heard
drafting?
of him before you just said his name, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Yeah. You weren't grinding Colorado State film all year.
no, sir. I was really locked in on those guards. I really think we have to take a guard in this draft. I don't know that there's a wing that really can do. I haven't really heard of any wings that can really do what we need them to do in that role, and we already have Khalil Ware, so and we have no idea. We have so many question marks in our guard core. So I
Mhm.
would be surprised if we took a wing in this draft. At least drafting one, like I'm sure we'll sign an undrafted free agent there. But as far as top talent, I think our guard core really needs to be rounded out, and we need to have options in case Davion Mitchell decides not to sign with us. So with that being said, I left all the wing coverage to you, and I'm watching his highlights right now, and he just had a nice little finish at the rim there. But otherwise, that's all I got.
Yeah, and wings are so valuable in the NBA now that if a wing sized player falls to 20, there's probably like a lot wrong with him. Where it's like if a guard sized player falls to 20, we've seen like Tyrese Maxey fall to there. Like there have been some guys where it's like, oh, he's a little too small. Will this translate? Will that translate? Wings, people are a lot more likely to take a chance on higher in the draft. So yeah, it's one of those picks where if the Heat took him, I'd be like, well, I'm sure he'll figure out a way to average like 7 a game and play hard defense, and he'll take some fun charges and stuff. So
Yeah.
it's not a pick I'd be over the moon about, but I would understand them taking a chance on somebody like that. We will now move into the forward section of the draft or of the Heat range of the draft. And these are some interesting guys in terms of draft evaluators rankings of them, because
Oh, yeah.
you can find, so we're starting with Rasheer Fleming, and you can find people that are arguing for him in the lottery, and you can find people that are arguing for him like in the late 20s, close to the second round. So Rasheer Fleming, right now, I believe Tankathon has him projected to go to the Heat. Hoop Intellect has also said the Heat would be a good fit for him. This guy is a defense first player, and he's pretty much going to fall under like the forward 3-and-D archetype. He's 6'8", and get ready for this because this is his big selling point: 7'5" wingspan. So that's insane. Um,
Jesus.
he also shot 39% from three in the
I
jump
did see
shot
that. That
Jump
is
shot looks
pretty
pretty
crazy.
good. So you're thinking, what is this guy doing at the 20th pick in the draft? Well, he can't dribble.
I was about to say, I was like, he probably can't dribble a basketball
He,
if
he
I had
can't
to guess.
he can't dribble a basketball. And he also can't really pass a basketball. So, and of course, I'm being tongue in cheek. He could develop those. He's better at those two things than I will ever be in my entire life. So, to be totally clear, but those are his weaknesses, and those are the reasons he is likely going to be closer to this range of the draft. But again, if he can be a good defender with that size and he can shoot at a decent clip from the three, even if it's just from the corners, that's a serviceable role player. You know, that's a rotation player. We've seen a guy like PJ Tucker make an entire career, make a lot of money off of that exact skill set. So Rasheer Fleming is somebody that if the Heat drafted, it make as much sense as anyone we've talked about because he really does seem like a Heat guy.
Now, with that PJ Tucker comp, do you feel like PJ Tucker was a more valuable or assertive passer, at least with his stint with Miami, than what this guy currently provides or shows the potential to be able to do?
Yeah, it's funny to think about because prior to that one season in Miami, I'd be like, yeah, they're pretty comparable passers.
PJ turned out to be a pretty good passer for us.
Yes, Bo's a
So,
wizard, but yeah, they were like posting PJ up and he was hitting cutters and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I don't see why they couldn't,
yeah.
develop Rasheer Fleming in that way. He was a junior, so he's almost 21. So he's not the youngest guy that, that you're not sure how much you can count on development the same way you could with like these freshmen. But I think it's possible for him to improve those areas. The other thing that's a little concerning about Rasheer Fleming is, you see 6'8", 7'5" wingspan, and you're like, oh, this is going to be a defensive monster. I like his help defense a lot. His on-ball defense, especially on the perimeter, is where more concern comes in.
He
There's
jumps
not
a lot.
yeah, and there's not like elite like high level lateral quickness. So like in theory, a guy that's 6'8", he's going to be playing power forward, he's going to be guarding power forward, but in the NBA, that's like the most dangerous position a lot of the time to be guarding. Then you're on Jason Tatum or Jalen Williams or Pascal Siakam or playoffs are on my mind, but you're dealing with some dangerous guys and you're going to need foot speed to handle them. So again, the Heat are an awesome developmental staff, and especially with helping guys get better on defense. So, with those tools, I'm sure they can make him into a defensive monster. But as we've seen, even with somebody like Haywood Highsmith, who's a different size player, but Haywood's developed into a pretty good 3-point shooter, but it's on low volume. He has to be very wide open. And other than the occasional floater, anything past that, he's not able to contribute much to the offense. And a lot of teams are just willing to leave him open because they know he doesn't really want to shoot a lot. And they also know he can't really attack a closeout too well. He can't make an extra pass, too well. It inhibits the defense a little bit when Haywood's forced to have the ball in his hand a lot. So that's again why this guy is at 20. I still this
Yeah.
Fleming falls into like that's cool, like would be my reaction on
Yeah, we'll
draft
see. It's that's definitely a we'll see reaction for me. I think ultimately my main concern would just be that I don't see this kind of guy really cracking any kind of rotation minutes in the first year, maybe even the first 2 years if he can't pass the ball and if he can't play defense, especially if he has to play like the four or something. Like maybe at the three, we could get desperate in that wing position, and he provides a little bit more size advantage and physicality there than some of our wings currently do. But if for some reason he actually have to play a forward front court position, I think he'd be relatively undersized and not exactly with the right skill set to fit into Spo's defense or offense for that matter. So I think he could definitely have a skill set that works in the NBA in some role, probably one that's more simplified than what our forwards do for this team, and even things that Khalil Ware has had to take a really long time to learn before he could really even crack the rotation. And he's shown to be a really skilled player on both sides of the ball. It is going to be a challenge for someone who can't dribble or pass.
Yeah, that's well said. And He is someone that, like, best case scenario, he would be a cool kind of third big because of his ability to shoot and do some off ball, like paint protecting, shot blocking kind of stuff. If he was playing with Kalel guarding the other team's center or
Yeah.
Bam guarding the other team's center, there could be some cool stuff there. So again, one of those guys where if the Heat take him, I'm going to be like, okay, they see something with him. And if they don't, then I'm just going to be like, I was right. This was not a good fit. So we'll see. We'll see what actually happens. But definitely a prospect with some tools that are intriguing. And then for the last prospect we're going to talk about, we have Noah Senge. I believe is how it's pronounced. This is another French player. This is another wing, kind of a power forward-ish type player. He's 6'8", with a 6'11" wingspan, which is still good, not as impressive as Fleming's, of course. 200 pounds, very young, 18 and a half years old. And he is it's tough to like not compare him to Fleming because they're similar size players who are going to be in the same range and have similar weaknesses. But so Asenge is mostly a play finisher right now. He basically is going to be, cutting a lot. He has shown much less 3-point ability. Now he is a lot younger. If, he was in his third year of college, like Fleming was, he might have developed his three a little more, but the jump shot does look concerning right now, but his athleticism and fluidity looks pretty good, and his connective passing is also pretty appealing to me. You see in his tape, there's a lot of just like quick decisions, extra passes that just kind of tell you, okay, this guy has some feel. He's one of those guys where like I would not be surprised if like in summer league they're putting him at the elbow and letting him make reads with different guys cutting around him. So a little more feel. What you're losing in the shooting with Fleming, you're kind of gaining in the feel department with Asenge. And again, younger, maybe a better athlete, and definitely has, I would say, more upside. So to me, again, 20th pick, swing for the home run. If you strike out, no one's going to remember. We went through the names. There's a lot of swings and misses in there. You might as well go for the upside. And I feel like of these forwards that could be here, Asenge probably has more upside. I saw one comp, I believe it was Hoop Intellect had this as well, as Jaden McDaniels, if the 3-point
Mhm.
shot can develop. So that would be a very useful player for the Heat to have.
Oh
But
yeah.
do you have any thoughts on that? Have you gotten to see any of Asenge so far?
Yeah, I watched a little bit of it. I can't remember why actually that name on the list was like, oh, I didn't realize that he was even a prospect mock to us when you had mentioned him. And ultimately, I think that it would be an okay pick there. Again, I think I've already kind of gone on my rant of why I don't think we should take a forward or a wing in this draft, mostly just because none of the talent was super exciting to me. But overall, I do think he has a little bit more potential than Fleming. I agree with you on that front. While the shooting isn't really there, I think he's shooting like 23 or 25% from three right now. That is a skill that we've seen can be developed, and his 3-point shooting coaching continues to get better. Shout out to Lethal Shooter. Maybe we can get him in a meeting with Noah. Then maybe that could work out. And so it's kind of hard to examine prospects from a shooting standpoint just because these days I feel like you can just show up and learn how to shoot a three, which was not the case even 5 years ago. So we'll see. I think he has some athleticism. I think he's kind of skinny for a guy of his size. And so what I did like about Fleming was that he did seem more muscular and like a larger build for playing that backup big position, maybe behind Bam and Kalel. Whereas Noah Singh would probably have to play strictly that kind of wing position and maybe some minutes at the four, but certainly not any minutes at the five, in my opinion. But overall, it's an interesting prospect. I think that it would be a pick I wouldn't have many feelings about one way or the other, but I wouldn't be severely disappointed, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that kind of puts into context all these different guys we've talked about. I think for me, like Jace is the I'm super excited pick. Walter Clayton Jr. is like the really guys, and then everything else is just like that's cool. Like I'm sure it'll work out. And again, as we're going through this, it always reminds me how contextual everything is. Like even just going through these things today, I was like, okay, why do I like Jace so much more than Walter Clayton Jr. when they're both undersized guards that have similar limitations, can both shoot, and it really gets you into interesting, like thought processes and things to kind of think out, because it's like, okay, what does differentiate players? Like, how different is Steph to Lillard to Lou Williams, right? Like, those guys all kind of they take their shots from similar areas, but they take them a
Yeah.
different way. It's just interesting
Probably
to
look
think
very
about.
similar in college as well. Like if you were trying to pick between those 3 in a draft, it's like, how did you decide that Steph Curry was the one that needed to be the one
Hmm.
that was gonna ascend to the level that he did? And how did Dame was gonna be a, second, but kind of a far away second, in the
Hmm.
way that he does almost the exact same thing, but just at a slight really an immense level of less success in doing
Hmm.
so, and translating. So it's always a weird situation for me. It's always, I think this is where the eye test is so important. I think this is where kind of the history of basketball and the feel of watching basketball and understanding what looks right and what doesn't look so right, or what looks forced in a lot of scenarios. That's where it comes into play, because I don't have any statistical numbers that could really tell me what advantages Jace Richardson would have over a guy like Walter Clayton Jr. But I know when I watch the two players, it feels like two very different brands of basketball. And the way Jace plays, that looks like a brand of basketball that I've seen be very successful over time, and just instills that kind of excitement to you. Some of it is just sports. Like some of it is like, that's an exciting electric player. And, Walter Clayton Jr. is an exciting electric player to some people. But at the end of the day, we'll just have to see who's right and who's wrong here in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of it's just like, hey, this is their most likely outcome. I feel like this player will be better if everyone hits their median outcome. But there's every chance Jace hits his medium outcome and Walter Clayton Jr. hits his, 100th percentile outcome. He becomes Jalen Brunson, or, like,
Yeah.
there's always outliers. So by no means are we claiming to be experts or fortune tellers in these things, but kind of these are our vibes, what we've picked up on. I meant to say this as I went along, but if anybody listening is like, these guys aren't in the Heat's range, I did find at least one mock draft that had each of these guys going to Miami. So, I have seen Jace as high as like 12 on some people's big boards, and I've seen him as low as 24, like to the Magic. So there's a wide range, really, once you get past the lottery. It could be pretty wide open, but different, publications, Sports Illustrated, CBS, Tankathon, at least all of them had some of these guys going in the Heat's range. So we'll see what happens. Of course, covering all of this is, we know the Heat are trying to make moves. We know that Shams Charania, Brian Windhorst, different guys keep reiterating that this is going to be a crazy summer. And Windhorst even specifically said it'll start sooner than usual and a lot of action will happen leading up to and around the draft. So, you know, maybe you're listening to this and the Heat have already traded the 20th overall pick. There's no telling, but this is what we're seeing right now. I did have that thought today, just as a side note. I was like, okay, I really love Jace Richardson. The Heat are definitely going to trade this pick now that
Yeah.
now that I have locked
Yeah, I
in.
was like, there's almost no scenario where they actually take that player, because we both really like him, and
Hmm.
I can't remember of ever guessing right on a Miami Heat pick. So that's unfortunate. I wish I never heard of the guy, never seen him before. I wish I found out about him on draft night, but unfortunately, I found out about him this week. So
Yes.
that's where we are. But who knows? Maybe this is our year where we get to make the shots, or make the calls rather, on who we draft.
Yep, could be. Well, that'll wrap up the show today. We hope we helped you guys learn a little bit about some guys that maybe are a future Heat legend in the making. And next time you hear from us, it'll probably be after the draft. So we'll be a couple weeks off with some different travel happening for us, but we will definitely have a draft recap. Or, of course, we could be recapping some big trade the Heat have made. So exciting times are ahead. I hope everyone is enjoying what's been a very fun NBA Finals. We appreciate everyone for tuning in. And please comment if you're on YouTube or Spotify if there's a specific prospect you really like for the Heat, or if you really want the Heat to trade this pick, whatever your feelings are about the 20th selection. And we'll talk to you guys soon, hopefully with some exciting news and exciting addition to the roster. For myself, Micah, my good friend Lino, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.